Afternoon intuitives. A little different back to the INFJ videos, and thank you for everyone new who subscribed and all of you that have been subscribed and continue to watch my videos for some reason. And if you watch and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and help the channel grow. Not all of this is me being an eccentric goofball. Some of it actually is important information for people like us to have that could potentially, you know, uh, lessen their hardships in life that we as INFJs and ENFJs often struggle with. Now, a little different this one. I want to talk about a common love shared by both INFJs and ENFJs, something that we're both intrigued by, something that we at times to time escape into, and it's also used to expand our knowledge and to seek truth. And as idealists, gives us hope into what could potentially be. And it was some of my favorite classes at university. I am, of course, talking about philosophy. Philosophy, both INFJs and ENFJs, for similar yet different reasons, are intrigued by philosophy and tend to be drawn to it, at least as a hobby. Many famous philosophers tend to be among our ranks. Arguably the most influential philosopher of all time, you see his thumbnail there, Plato, is said to have been an INFJ, at least based on the historical documents we know of him. That's what people have concluded. And that leads me, into a little sidetrack before I get into the meat of this. Makes perfect sense to me. He's been my favorite philosopher since childhood. Mainly obviously I've read The Republic, had to, college, and other of his works, but two of his works are my all-time favorites and spawned an interest since like the age of 6, which I still have today, and actually was a reason why I was into archaeology as a kid and later pursued archaeology for a year at the University of Toronto after having been seemingly cheated out of my firefighter job the first time in 2006, and I still don't know the full story of that and never will, and need to let that go. Alas, I cannot. But the stories I'm talking about are Timaeus and Critias, which, if you're not familiar with them, I'm sure you've heard of them because they tell the greatest story ever told, the story of Atlantis. And the story of Atlantis, knowing that Plato's an INFJ, makes a lot of sense. Atlantis, if you're not familiar with it and been living under a rock, it's used as an influence in like pretty much every work of fiction in some way. Like, for example, if you watched Game of Thrones and you've heard the story of the Doom of Valyria, essentially what Martin did was marry the story of Atlantis and the fall of Rome. Atlantis is very important, and many other tales tell similar stories. So, if you're not familiar with it because you're lying, it's about an idealistic society that's destroyed in a single day and night because they became essentially corrupt, debaucherous, narcissistic. Basically, they embraced all the things that piss INFJs and ENFJs off, and Plato's like, see, this is what caused its destruction. That's why we Athenians shouldn't do that. But if we embrace the ideals of people like me, Plato, then we will have this, glorious, super advanced society. So there's a lot of conjecture about Atlantis, but essentially, especially when you get like the ancient astronaut people involved. But essentially, to sum it up, it was basically supposedly this advanced civilization at the end of the last ice age that at a time when we were supposedly hunter-gatherers had the about the technological abilities of what existed during like the Roman Republic. So way, way, way in advance. And if you're not, Atlantis translates to island of Atlas, and the ancient Greeks called the one world ocean, the ocean of Atlas, the ocean of the world. Atlas is the Greek word for world. So Atlantis was an island in the middle of the one world ocean, which is why some people think it's Antarctica, because the Ross Sea is the world's largest natural harbor. Read Plato's works before. I'm just going to tell you to read the work, otherwise we're going to be here for a while, me going on about Atlantis. But the idea of such an idealistic society existing, I was always drawn to it. Even as a kid, I didn't know what an INFJ was then. I just knew I was different. And then I was pretty much told that was bad. But, that story meant a lot to me. The idea that such a society not only existed because it was more ancient than it should be, and, that it was destroyed, and the survivors of that cataclysm spread out throughout the world and thus created the rise of civilization. Maybe that was the INFJs and the ENFJs. Maybe we're the Atlanteans. But, just the thought of such an idealistic society potentially, possibly existing at one time. It's like, what could be? If such a thing existed once, perhaps it could exist again. Perhaps such a society, based on Atlantis in its principles, could one day exist again. Certainly not while the baby boomers are alive, but perhaps one day. Dare to dream, right? So, that is just an interesting little anecdote about, hey, Plato's an INFJ, he's an idealist. Kind of makes sense of the whole Atlantis thing and what he was warning the ancient Athenians about. And, he was right, because his intuition basically said, if you don't listen to history, Athenians, Greece will go the same way as Atlantis. And these are the things that led to their downfall, and I see them happening all the time. Iceberg dead ahead, please listen to me. But they didn't. So, the Hellenistic Empire eventually did fall, largely due to a lot of the same reasons that Atlantis fell, if it existed. Of course, not the cataclysm thing. No, I don't. Yes, I do want to believe that there was an Atlantis, and no, I don't think it was the Minoans on Crete or Santorini. Although, interestingly enough, we still haven't been able to translate Linear A and Linear B, which is the languages left by the Minoan civilization. So, hey, maybe, we don't know what those texts say. Translate a word here and there, but can't. But back to my main point about philosophy. So, as INFJs, and I did a long-winded way of explaining our idealistic nature and how that's important to us and how that leads to our worldview and how we want to try to influence others and how our idealistic nature can create, a society that's more equal for all. INFJs, both real and fictional, try to do this. Plato tried to do it. Martin Luther King, he tried. Mandela, doesn't always work out so well. Jimmy Carter tried to get peace in the Middle East. If only the hostages were released. And you see it in fiction as well with INFJs. Fox Mulder wanted to, his idealistic nature wanted the truth about aliens out. Daenerys Targaryen wanted to break the chains of oppression. INFJs, intuition, idealistic nature, this is what things could be, this is our philosophy, and we usually just get slandered as crazy. I did a video about it. But as INFJs, that idealistic nature also includes realistic and logical points of view, but we have many sides to our personalities, so there is a meld of different things. We can reel in our idealistic nature in our practical life philosophy sometimes. So INFJs were often drawn to philosophy and many theoretical ideals inside of our own minds because we overthink everything all the time. Can't stop. And we enjoy absorbing knowledge and are always looking to expand our minds as much as we can. We want to know what can be, not, settle, status quo. Settle, a bad word. Bad. Never, 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 never. If it's possible, we'll find a way. It just takes longer. Little INFJ anecdote. The impossible just takes longer. So, as INFJs and ENFJs too, enjoy philosophical thoughts and love exploring the deeper meaning of all things. Oh, yes, there's deeper meanings in all things, and if anyone can read between the lines, we will. Well, INFJs and ENFJs will read between the lines, and INFJs will overthink it and throw ourselves into an NITI loop, and hopefully the ENFJs will pull us out of it. But it's like, please help me get out of my own head. Please, you know, get me out of my own head, and I'll teach you how to say no. That's our symbiosis between the INFJs and the ENFJs. So we can often get carried away with our own rich and imaginative ideas, which, make us rather intrigued by philosophy. Oh, yes, an INFJ. When in doubt, hide inside your own head. Think about what can be. Think of every little detail of how to make it true. Even though every little detail may be like as difficult as diffusing a bomb, it is still technically possible. ENFJs, in a similar manner, are focused on people who work hard and tend to the needs of their loved ones. People focused. You're extroverts. While on the surface, ENFJs a lot of times appear more interested in getting like actual things done than they are like philosophical thought. They, like the INFJs, enjoy that deep thought and idealistic nature of wondering what could potentially be. They're better at actually getting it done, though, because we'll overthink it and they'll just go for it at some point. I admire that. Teach me how to do that. So ENFJs have extremely active minds and are always looking to absorb knowledge, although unlike INFJs, they are far better at expressing that knowledge. ENFJs learn things and then they do things with that knowledge. INFJs, we learn things just to know things because we're not that social at times. Yeah. Every INFJ will have a ton of useless knowledge, yeah, and will bring up random facts about random things all the time, seemingly out of nowhere. It'll go off on tangents in their conversations. Thinking in my head, a good fictional example of this is an INFJ who does this regularly. It's a fictional character. If anybody back in a couple years back watched this show Grimm, Monroe, the wolf guy, yeah, that's probably the best example, at least that I can think of an INFJ who has lots of useless knowledge and will try to share that knowledge whenever he can. And then, as INFJs, we do that all the time, especially with philosophical ideas, and it'll come up seemingly randomly in a conversation that'll then tie to that anecdote making sense, but then we'll be like, how do I know that? Why do I know that? Things of that nature. I know this video's not going as smoothly as I wanted it to. So, yeah, ENFJs enjoy philosophy as much as INFJs and never seem to stop thinking about new and interesting ideas, although they can usually make it more practical than we can. INFJs aren't the most practical people a lot of the time. So, our love of philosophy as INFJs and ENFJs help expand our mind. They're great for our idealistic nature to learn philosophical points of potentially how to bring that idealistic nature into fruition of some sort. It helps us with understanding that the ideals that we hold do reside at times in deep philosophical principles and that those ideals are at times applicable to the world around us, even knowledge from the ancient Greeks, cycles, patterns. People repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again and don't listen to people who want to try something different because the status quo is hard to change. So, as INFJs and ENFJs continue to search for philosophical enlightenment, use what you learn to try to enlighten others and to change the world for the better in our idealistic nature. Especially you ENFJs, you get things done. INFJs just think and think and think and think. So, philosophy can be a useful tool in that regard. It's not only interesting, kills time, exercises your mind, allows you to use that deep imagination, allows you to use your intuition, and your logical thinking and your intuitive thinking, and can potentially help people by giving you a way to explain things better, or to use anecdotes from history to try to get your point across so they just don't think it's coming out of your eccentric mind. In short, please like, subscribe, trust your intuition, never sell out your integrity, look for enlightenment in philosophy, and yeah, understand that your love of philosophy is a part of your personality, and that learning it and being able to possibly use it and going off on little tangents like I did in this video is just part of being one of us.